Hi everyone, my name is Melissa.
Hi, I'm Thomas. We're gonna talk today a little bit about our backgrounds, and the main purpose is to make you more comfortable with trying your first acroyoga class. I think there might be a lot of people who've seen cool videos on Instagram or who are like really curious about trying it, but there's a little bit of this like reality gap between seeing something on your phone versus you actually walking into a class and doing it and knowing you're ready for it, or there might be worries that how safe it is, like how safe is it doing it with a stranger. And so we're gonna talk a little bit about our backgrounds.
Okay.
How did you get started with acroyoga?
Okay, so the first time that I did acroyoga, I went to a class at a studio. I didn't know anybody in that class. I was going and trying acroyoga for the first time. I have pretty much just moved to the city, maybe like 5 months before, so everything was kind of like new. And it was great. It was very, very fun experience. No regrets. Everybody was very, very welcoming, very nice. I actually, funny story, ended up realizing it was an intermediate class instead of a beginner class. After the class, I went and looked it up again to take it the next week, the following week, and then I realized that in like very small caps it said intermediate level. But again, everybody was very welcome. I was like, what's bird? What's this? How do I do this? And everybody was very detailed, thorough in their explanation, very like eager to help and explain things to you. You know, not even only the professors, but also the students as well. What was your first acroyoga experience?
Actually, let me just check in. Like, you went in an intermediate class for your first class?
Yes.
Like, you must be kind of like a badass that you didn't even notice you're in an intermediate class.
Yeah. I was like, wow, I was like, what's going on? It's a lot going on here. But honestly, like, I think that just being very confident and even maybe like not knowing anybody in the class and just me going there by myself helped because I felt very confident and there was not one thing that people would tell me like, oh, try it, that I would say no to that. I would just be like, I felt very safe because, you know, people were very welcoming. The teachers were very like safety cautious and very professional. And then we also had a lot of spotters. For everything that we were doing, we had one or at least two spotters. So even in doing like more difficult intermediate level things, we had two people kind of like holding everything together and like, you know, touching you and lifting you where you needed to. So it was kind of like just like a safe environment for me to go and practice and say yes to everything. And then afterwards I was like, oh, it was an intermediate class. Wow. No wonder.
I think I heard something in what you say said like, it's kind of like a tip for people who are new, like you want to give things a try.
Yeah.
Right? To be like willing to try things.
Exactly.
Well, like what tips would you give people who are like coming to like a new class and trying it out?
I would say like do not get discouraged by you know, not having done yoga before or gymnastics or acrobatics or like a pirouette before. I don't think it's even that much about your like physical or physical body, physical strength. I think it's more about like your mindset. So just come up with like a very open mind, very confident, and just like say yes to everything that you feel comfortable, of course, doing. I think that acroyoga is like a very social activity. So there's always the like safety approach and like safety environment. So if you feel confident in doing things, definitely like people will be willing to help you and try out anything that you want. So be very confident, say yes, and be very open to trying new things.
That's a great tip, to be open to trying new things. Have there ever been like a time where you felt discouraged or where you couldn't follow your own tip?
I mean, for example, when you go to jams in acroyoga, that could be a little bit intimidating because there could be like a lot of professionals performing things that you are seeing in Instagram and seeing in Reels, and maybe you're thinking like your first kind of like mental thought is like, oh, those professionals are not gonna want to practice with me. I am a beginner. Like I'm just gonna waste their time. But it's never like that. It's professionals even like to teach you and let you know about like cues and little things. So even like in classes, they always tell you like, oh, practice with different people. So like even if you're a beginner and you're practicing with an intermediate or vice versa, uh, people's bodies like are different. So it's always good to practice with different people to kind of have that like sense and feeling. So there's really like there's kind of like levels in the things that you're learning, but not that much in like people skills and like people connecting with other people. People will always be like very willing to help and yeah, just ask.
Well, like you mentioned, it can feel intimidating to go to a jam when you see people doing high-level things.
Exactly.
And maybe some worries about being included. Like, what does it feel like for you when you walk in, and how do you get yourself out of being intimidated? Like, do you have like a mantra, or like, how do you deal with that?
So one of the things that I actually do is, for example, consistency. So I try to, okay, if I go to a jam and I like it and I like acroyoga, I try to make that commitment to being consistent with it. And so like trying to go to a weekly jam, to a weekly thing, not only so I get better, but also so I keep up with the people and keep up kind of like with the levels that are going by. So for example, if that first day I met somebody that's kind of like a kind of like beginner intermediate, maybe they're in the same level as I am, I can keep practicing with those people and kind of like keep on growing at that same level. So I think that also like definitely like being confident, asking questions, acro yoga again, very social activity, so people will be willing to help, but also kind of like being consistent in like kind of like going and interacting with people and like connecting with people and following up on like practice and all that. I think also helps. People, I think in general, kind of like appreciate that.
You said there were many answers, kind of how the environment is very supportive. Like
Yeah.
you said in your first class, you didn't know anything, and people didn't complain that they had to explain you things
Exactly.
that was the most basic thing.
Exactly, not at all.
You said when you went to jams, people were like supportive even though you thought they were like at a way higher level.
Exactly. So that first class, people were like, "Okay, yeah, bird," and I was like, "I'm sorry, I do not know what bird means. Like, please talk to me in like English. Talk to me in small words." And they were like, "Oh, okay, no worries. Like, okay, so you have to get on the floor, do this, kind of like look at the person next to you, and we'll get a spotter." And same with the jams. Actually, one of my first jams, I practiced with a very like professional person, and again, like that person gave me like a lot of like confidence. It made me feel like very safe. So those are all like really good experiences that I've had with acro yoga. Just overall, again, people being very welcoming and very like fun to play with and be around.
I like your earlier also mentions that in the community it's very encouraged to help beginners.
Mm-hmm.
To like not be closed off and be like, oh, that person not good enough for me, it's a waste of my time, but actually
Yeah.
to
Exactly.
help people come up. Are there any stories that stick in your mind about like how someone kind of helped you or how you helped someone else?
Yeah, I think there's always like tips and tricks. So maybe like some person will be like watching you and they'll say like, oh, like actually for start you have to like lower your like your leg, like your lower leg, and kind of like create a little like kind of like tension with your hip there, kind of like a little placement. So maybe like some ideas that come to mind is like maybe you're a beginner, you're practicing some beginner steps, but asking somebody that's on a higher level or more professional to just look at you and let you know what you can do better, or for that professional to also spot you so they can also see where you're like lacking kind of like those little cues. And always just also taking classes, and I feel like in classes you can also say like, oh, I would like to practice a side start entrance, which for me was something that was a little bit challenge at first to kind of like take on. But then like in one single class, like I would do it in jams and I wasn't like 100% there. later, like in other jams, it would at first be like a little bit confusing and challenging. But then after going to a class and like practicing it a lot, and the teacher giving me like cues and like looking at me and seeing what I was doing wrong, I was able to, after that, get it fine. Yeah.
I think side star is memorable milestone for a lot of people because it's a little trickier to learn.
Yeah.
Like everything else,
it's
like
a little
bird, you
skill,
kind of
yeah.
get it on the first try, but side star, there's so many alignment pieces to it, and there's so much between what's a base
And the
has to do
flyer.
and the flyer and how you have
It's
to
work for
incorporate.
both. It's work for both, definitely.
Speaking about milestones, like what are the milestones kind of in your acroyoga career? Like what are like big points in your development? Like learning side stars usually.
Absolutely.
Something for people. What else?
Yeah, so just like first like basic poses and just like inversions in general. So like shoulder stand, a star, kind of like things like that, and then kind of like more going into like flows as well, like harder flows is kind of like another level of like milestone for me, side star as well. And then now doing like hand to hand, that's one of like the funnest things in acro yoga, the most like seeked after kind of like things, doing like L basing or like a lower like hand to hand, or also like standing hand to hand, a castaway also would be a very fun one. I don't know what this one is called, but it's actually like hand to hand, but like kind of like in the person's like arm, like here.
Like here? You do hand to hand on the elbow?
It's kind of like one arm here and one other arm here. Maybe the
like
base is
standing?
yeah.
Like
maybe,
you stand and the
yeah.
flyer is doing a handstand.
Yeah,
Like-
maybe the
like
base
so?
is kind of like holding your arm a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like trying to
Huh.
balance there.
Nice. Yeah, I get the impression like hand to hand is like a thing people get really focused on.
Yes.
And I
They
see
only do
people
that.
like they learn a lot of things, but once they get to hand, they practice a lot. They just keep like endlessly going up, going down, going up, going down.
Yeah.
And I did a solar immersion over 5 days. We worked with the goal of getting to standing hand to hand.
Wow.
Like the whole 5 days were like daily
Hand to hand,
handstand practice for it, and we did all kinds of different exercises to at the end on the last day get to standing hand to hand.
And
I like my neck is fused, so I can't look up. My shoulder is messed up, so I'm kind of handicapped. But on the last day, I got to do it with a teacher, and I managed to hold her for like 3 seconds.
okay.
Before
There
I
you
came
go.
down.
Yeah. And when was that? This year?
No, that was like maybe 7-8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I see. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. So there's also like a lot of like immersions and like retreats and stuff like that, which I've heard are pretty fun.
Nice.
What else?
Have you ever gotten injured, or have you heard about injuries, or what's kind of your take on injuries? Because a lot of people are probably worried about getting hurt doing acroyoga.
Yeah.
And
No.
let me just add, I think there's a little bit of a thing going on where there is a possible danger and an actual danger, like skydiving.
Mm-hmm.
It seems very dangerous because you could fall to your death. But if you actually look at statistics, it's super safe.
Yeah.
It's like, if your chute doesn't open, there's a second chute. If you go unconscious, your altimeter is configured to open the chute for you. Like everything has so many duplicate safety things.
Yeah,
that
exactly. Has like backup.
skydiving is actually very safe, but if you look at soccer, people don't think much about playing soccer.
Mm-hmm.
But soccer, people break their legs, they run into another player with their head, and they hurt their head. And there are actually like a lot of injuries in things like playing soccer.
Yeah.
Even though we don't think it's dangerous, so there's a thing where you look at it, something could go wrong, but there's does it actually go wrong? And I think maybe acroyoga is a similar thing where people think it's super dangerous, but there are a lot of things we do for safety, right?
Exactly, exactly. It is like that. Eh, of course, it has like its degree of like complexity once you start doing things that are a little bit more riskier, a little bit more complex. But like everything, it has kind of like its steps. I think it's very safe. There's plenty of ways to keep being safe, all the way to doing those like crazy periods, etc. Having like spotters, working with like mats around and like those kind of like fake mats as well. And then always like kind of like practice, like be confident and open minded, yes, but also practice like within your ability. Like if you can do a handstand, like don't try doing a hand to hand with like somebody that you do not know and know that like doesn't have the strength to be like a base or do like a hand to hand as well. Uh, Let me think. Uh, yeah, I think it's generally very safe. I have heard of people getting injured, mostly, for example, with like shoulder dislocations or like elbow dislocations, and I have to say that that sometimes also happens. But that's preventable. That's preventable if you're also kind of like building muscle. So, for example, if you're taking acroyoga completely like seriously and you're very committed to it, flexibility. Flexibility is very important, yes, but it's also important like strength and having like building muscle. So like building muscle around like the knees for like the joints and like any pops and like I don't know, like jumps that you might have to do. Same with like the shoulders and elbows as well. So there's always, I think, like ways to prevent injuries in all levels. Like something just as small as like falling and like bruising your hand or something, all the way to like a shoulder or dislocation or something. Maybe like a little like bruise could be saved or prevented by using a spotter. Maybe like a shoulder dislocation or something could be prevented by like doing things in your level, practicing with teachers, professionals, and then also like building muscle and building that like strength, physical strength as well, for like higher level things.